Welcome to the June 22nd, 2021 Planning Commission meeting. My name is CJ Mann. I will be chairing today's meeting. We have 5 discussion items on our agenda today and 1 committee report. With a full agenda, I would ask for a focus on each discussion item to allow us to get through the entire agenda. If any participant or community member have issues with the technology, please send a message to the moderator. Today's moderator is Mr. Ray All. With today's agenda, staff has included a draft motion of templates to be used for our use. If the commissioner or if a commissioner would like to make a motion, please use the materials included in the backup. I would ask for commissioners to hold all questions until the conclusion of all presentation and public comments. Finally, please be recognized by the chairperson before speaking. Before we move on to the public comment area of the meeting, I would like to announce a small change in today's meeting agenda. The applicant of CP 121 would like to defer their case to our next scheduled meeting in August. Without further objection, we would defer CP 121 per the request of the applicant. Do we have any objection to doing so? Seeing none, let's move on to the public comment portion of our meeting today. With the start of every meeting, we offer an opportunity for the public to comment on an item not contained on the agenda. No one has signed up for public comment today. Ray, is that still the case?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay, moving on from the public comment. Next item on our agenda is the consent agenda. The consent agenda is a list of requests that can be acted upon in one motion. There are 6 items on the consent agenda for today. Staff has completed review and has delivered the items to the Planning Commission to be deferred to a future meeting. All of these items will return on a future agenda to be discussed fully. With that, I would ask for a motion to approve the items on the consent agenda. Got a motion standing from Commissioner Bennett. Do I have a second? Send a second from Commissioner McIntosh. Commissioner Bennett has offered a motion to approve. Commissioner McIntosh has seconded that motion to approve the consent agenda. Because this is not a final vote, I will ask for a show of hands who support the motion. All in favor of, we've got, okay, all opposed. Any opposed? Seeing none, that motion passes 7-0. On to our next item, the committee report. We have 1 committee report item to address in today's meeting. The Text Change Committee met on June the 15th and discussed 1 text change request. That item was TC 17A20. It is a request to amend the UDO to amend the regulations related to transit overlay districts. The committee identified a number of recommended edits and requested additional information from staff on 2 topics. These 2 topics were the ability to prohibit certain uses and the magnitude on the affordable housing density bonus. The committee made a recommendation to the Planning Commission to request a 45-day time extension of the review period and to continue those discussions. The new deadline for the recommendations would be September 28, 2021. At this time, I'd like to ask for the committee chair, Commissioner Miller, to expand on any of these items I talked about if she has any.
Thank you, Vice Chairman. I think that about covers it. When I spoke with staff regarding this text change before we met, they said there was not an expectation that this would be passed on the first reading. So this 45-day extension would allow us to look at this text change at our next committee meeting after the summer break.
Thanks, Commissioner Miller. Any other comments before we move on? Seeing none. At this time, I would like to ask for a motion to request that 45-day time extension for case TC 17A. Have a motion from Commissioner Miller. Do I see a second? And a second from Commissioner O'Haver. We've got a motion that stands from Commissioner Miller and a second from Commissioner O'Haver. All in favor, we can just raise our hands. Okay, seeing no opposition, we have a vote of 7-0 that the final disposition of the case will be in 45 days. Motion passes 7-0. On to our old business section of the agenda. We have 2 items to talk about today with old items. I see. I'm sorry. Did I make a wrong count?
8-0.
Okay, I'm sorry. 8-0.
That's okay.
And let's back up then on the consent agenda. I said 7-0 on the consent. Let's scratch that and make that 8. As I said, there are 2 items on the old business portion of the agenda today. These requests were previously discussed at the June 8th Planning Commission agenda, where the items were deferred to allow the applicants to provide further information. First case we'll hear today is item Z5820. This is an item or request to rezone approximately 50 acres of land of agricultural productive with a special highway overlay district 1 to residential mixed use 3 stories with a conditional use. The special highway overlay district 1 would remain. This request was discussed at our last meeting where the commission requested additional information about the transportation improvements in the area. I would like to ask for an update from staff on any new information. John Agnos presented that case, and I would like to see if he has any updates on that matter.
Good morning. This is KC-58-20. And as the chair said, it's a request to rezone from agricultural productive to a combination of residential 10 and residential mixed use 3 stories with conditions and retaining the SHOD overlay. If we could advance 2 slides, please, just to get reminded of the location. So this site is at the northeast quadrant of Buffalo Road and I-540, just west of Forestville Road. And you can see the current uses in the area. It's about 50 acres. I will note an error from the last time you saw this case. The previous maps showed the property, the portion of this parcel south of Buffalo Road as being part of the request. It is solely the area north of Buffalo on this parcel that's included in the request. So it's about 50 acres. And if we could advance 4 more slides, please, to see the zoning boundaries that are proposed. So just a reminder of where the residential 10 and residential mixed use boundaries are on the site. So the RX3 being along Buffalo Road. 1 more slide, please. And then you do have some conditions providing for a maximum density in the R10 portion, a buffer along the northern boundary, and a minimum open space area. Next slide, please. And then more buffering for the RX portion, a setback along its northern boundary, and an undisturbed yard along its eastern boundary along William and Mary Drive. And so just to recap, the consistency evaluation is evaluated as consistent with the future land use map and comprehensive plan. And with that update, or not update, but just reminder of the case, I'd like to switch it over to some information from transportation staff. Last time you saw this, there was a request for some information about how transportation, vehicular traffic is being managed in the area around I-540 and Buffalo Road in response to multiple development projects that are pending or coming online currently. And so today we have Eric Lamb from Transportation Planning to walk through some of that information.
Good morning, Commissioners. Again, I'm Eric Lamb. I am the Transportation Planning Manager with the City of Raleigh Department of Transportation. I want to give you sort of a higher altitude conversation about this area. There's a lot of things happening at once. The last time that the Commission took a look at what was happening relative to Buffalo Road, it was primarily regarding what was inside of the outer loop or west of the Buffalo Road I-540 interchange. I'm going to focus exclusively on what's happening east of that area, east of that interchange. So next slide. So first I want to get you oriented to the big picture. 540 is the dominant transportation facility in this area. It was completed actually not that long ago. It was completed around 2005, 2006. Buffalo Road is the primary east-west corridor in this area. And between 540 and the Neuse River, there are not a lot of opportunities for additional crossings. Both of those facilities represent something of a barrier. And so you can see all of these north-south roads with Forestville, Old Mill Bernie, Old Cruise, all of these facilities all funnel traffic into Buffalo. And that's part of what creates the adverse traffic situation that we have out on the ground today. Forestville is especially noteworthy as It connects into the US 401 corridor to the north. That corridor can be heavily congested. And then, so a lot of that traffic will, in the north end of the Forestville corridor, would use Forestville instead to access 540 as effectively a bypass for 401. So, so we have a situation where traffic is congested out here today, and this is, you know, these are primarily rural roads for the most part. So, if you think about where North Raleigh was 30 years ago, this is probably where we're at right now relative to land development and infrastructure working to catch up. So next slide. The other thing that's interesting about this area is that there's some jurisdictional challenges. So you can see Buffalo runs through the middle of the screen here. Once you're east of Old Watkins, the south side of the corridor is exclusively under the jurisdiction of the town of Knightdale. And then a little further out, then we're into the county. And again, the predominant land use out here is extremely low density residential or agricultural. Next slide. Now, part of the land use half of this equation is that the area that you see that's surrounded in the hatching, that is part of the city's long-range urban service area. So even though it's not inside of the city's planning jurisdiction now, it's intended long-term that it would be part of the city's jurisdiction. So in this area, we're effectively coming around Knightdale. But one of the big challenges from a transportation standpoint actually has to do with the homogeneity of all the land uses are exclusively residential. And you can see a couple of spots of red here closer to 540. And even the subject case has in the future land use map some recommendations about mixed use and commercial development. I believe the applicant is looking at exclusively residential development on the site right now. But one of the challenges when we have large swaths of uniform land development, such as all residential, the challenge from my standpoint is that then becomes a recipe for exclusive car trips. And so there are no amenities that are immediately adjacent to the many rooftops that are out here. And so you literally have to get in your car to get to everything, irrespective of how much infrastructure we build relative to multimodal facilities. The fact is we just don't have the mix of land uses out here at the current time, and it's not forecasted to change that much in the future land use planning for the city. Next slide. So we also have a lot of activity out here right now. There's a lot of developments taking place. So, and these are some of the approved developments in this area. Either approved or almost approved. But you can see how much traffic based on our averages. Again, when we talk about mixes of land uses, one of the things that does is that even though retail can be a driver for development, it's also useful for trip capture with not having to drive as far to get to those amenities, and having residential and office uses that are adjacent to retail can lead to more walking trips. So there's no mitigation in these cases for any type of trip capture and very little for multimodal reduction. So with the approved on the one hand, we've got over 8,000 new trips that are on the ground. And if you want to think about that, typically with a single family house tends to generate on average about 8 to 9 trips per day. So, and I will qualify that to say that was certainly pre-pandemic patterns. We're gonna have to wait and see how things shake out in the new framework. But that's, you know, 1 or 2 people going to work in the morning, 1 or 2 people coming back home in the afternoon, school trips, trips to the grocery, trips to shopping and other things. So we'll go to the next slide. When you add in the other development that's on tap, and the big one that's out there is the Rivertown development. And again, that's a very large development that is exclusively residential. Between what we've got approved and what's in the pipeline for development, we're talking about 25,000 new trips in this area that's already congested. So next slide. And this shows you just a little bit of the geographic distribution of the cases that we're talking about here. And you can see the case that's at hand is there adjacent to the 540 interchange. Next. So as part of the city's comprehensive plan, the city of Raleigh has a prescription for the cross sections for every major street in the city. We are a very planned city, and that planning has taken place over the years, where we have looked at what are the future land use considerations, working with the Capital Area Metropolitan Planning Organization to determine what does the size of the street system need to be relative to the land use forecasts that we're working with. And so the streets are color coded here. Red for 540 is interstate freeway facility. The darker blue line is indicating a 6-lane planned facility. And then the aqua blue lines are indicating 4-lane facilities. And then the purple with the white stripe is 3-lane facilities. So with the exception of 540, virtually none of these frontages out here in this area meet any of these cross-sectional requirements. And that's one of the things that the city does in working with each individual development is to exact and require those frontage improvements as part of the development. We also have some mechanics for reimbursements for those as part of our facility fee program, where we take impact fees from each individual development and have some reimbursement opportunities there. But like I said, if you put this through the lens of where North Raleigh was 30 years ago, there was a lot of investment that took place by the city and by NCDOT to go through and build out a lot of that infrastructure in addition to those development related requirements. And so I think you're going to see a lot of that same framework play out here, but the development is certainly happening quickly. That 6-lane section of Buffalo Road, if you just back up 1 second, that was something that was expanded as part of our last evaluation of the comprehensive plan when we did the translation from the old code to the new code and took a look at what all the system needs were in looking at the future land use and the traffic forecasts, the travel demand for Buffalo Road to the west of Watkins, which is the old Watkins is the purple north-south line, well north of 35 to 50,000 cars per day. And that puts us into 6-lane territory. So as this particular development, if you go to the next slide, as this particular case comes online, if it's approved and there's development of the property, what you see highlighted in gold here are sections where there's already been frontage improvements or there will be new frontage improvements that take place. So the good thing is with all the development that's happening fronting Buffalo Road between 540 and Forestville, we'll actually have a 6-lane street footprint with that development. And so we'll have a fairly complete set of infrastructure for that first leg east of the interchange. And then you'll see, again, we work down, but this doesn't represent a cohesive set of improvements. And this is the type of thing that as more development takes place, the city would be expected to come back in later with a public project and fill in all those gaps and connect up the work that the prior developments have done. The real gauntlet out here is the 540 interchange. If you'll go to the next slide. And this is a picture when it was constructed, fairly fresh in 2006. I want you to understand the strategy that we have in play here. So the interchange was developed by NCDOT as part of the overall 540 project. We'd advised them that we thought that there could be additional capacity added to the interchange. They opted to go with a phased approach. So you can see the old roadbed alignment to the north there, and then the new bridge constructed to the south. And so if you go to the next slide, This is what the final version looks like on the ground today. And so DOT retained all of the right-of-way associated with the old roadbed alignment. And so the plan here is that this will eventually be 6 lanes worth of bridge to match up with that travel demand. And if you do one click, you can see this is where we will build the other bridge on the original road alignment and complete that section. So this is the challenge. We have requested this project for funding from NCDOT. It scores well through their prioritization process, but has not yet scored high enough for funding. Some of the things that's in its favor is that it's, because it's related to an interstate facility, it has some priorities for funding, but that's also a very competitive pot in our region. It also, again, being highly congested, also scores highly and favorably. So right now, as a best case for this interchange, if we are to get it funded from NCDOT through the next round of prioritization, the best case for construction would be on a 2030 timeframe. So this is part of the sensitivity with looking at all the new development, even though, as I said, with the frontage improvements we'll get from development, we'll have a complete 6-lane section east of 540. The ramp constraints here are really, it's the significant constraint that having single-lane ramps. And primarily the condition that we're most concerned with is the afternoon peak hour, because given the prevailing patterns in this area, 540 is north-south in this area. The ramp that is southbound on 540 that provides the left turn onto Buffalo Road is the most critical item, because the amount of queuing and demand that we have today, that traffic backs up significantly on that ramp. And what we're trying to avoid is a condition where that traffic backs up out onto 540. Because that's a critical safety situation where if traffic is spilling out onto the interstate during peak hour and you've got traffic stopped and entering a travel lane, that is a high-risk condition for rear-end collisions. And so that's the primary condition we're trying to avoid. So in our conversations with NCDOT, we've explored some interim improvements that could be taken into account with the bridge and the existing footprint that we have out there. One consideration that we are exploring, right now the bridge is striped for 3 lanes. We're looking at the option of going in and restriping this bridge to allow for 4 narrow travel lanes. And what that would allow us to do is if we can accomplish that, then that would allow us to make dual lefts coming off of that southbound ramp from 540 onto eastbound Buffalo Road. And that would significantly abate that concern about queuing out onto 540. So that would buy us some time. It's not the complete solution, but it would be an adequate interim solution. And that's what we're working through right now to make sure that we've got adequate space on the bridge to be able to accommodate that. And then again, we've got so many developments happening at one time out here. Part of the challenge with NCDOT is sorting out which development has those impacts and is going to be responsible for making those mitigations versus what are going to be the public investments that either NCDOT or the city of Raleigh has to make. So that is the landscape. It is not satisfying to not have better answers for you right now as part of what our game plan is. We're subject to funding through the state and through city resources, but that's the best we have at this time. And commissioners, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thanks. I'd like to ask for commissioners to hold their questions until we hear from the applicant. So we've already received an applicant presentation and heard from the members of the public. If we would like to gather additional information, we would need to vote to grant additional time to speak. Without further objection, I would like to grant 6 minutes to each side. We have 3 members from the public sign up to speak. I'd like to give those folks 2 minutes each to speak and also give the applicant 6 minutes to time to speak. So without further objection, by just a show of hands, I'd like to offer that time to both sides to speak. All those in favor, just show a raise of hands. Seeing none in opposition, let's now call on the applicant, Mr. Worth Mills, I know you've got some additional comments and additional materials that we have. So, Mr. Mills, I'll leave the floor open to you and give you 6 minutes to speak in response to these questions.
Thank you, Commissioner Mann, and good morning to the rest of the Planning Commission. When we left off at our last Planning Commission meeting, we wanted to provide some additional information regarding the infrastructure improvements that this rezoning would be able to make, and how those infrastructure improvements would create benefits to the street network as a whole. And so since that time, we've gone back with Ramey Kemp, and we've got additional information and some additional exhibits to show you. If you could go to the third slide, please. Yep. So at this point, I'm going to let Caroline Cheeves with Ramey Kemp, who has prepared this presentation, lead y'all through that. And then we are also available to answer questions at the end of the presentation. Thanks.
Hi, I'm Caroline Cheeves, and first I would like to thank, I'm getting some feedback, there we go. First I'd like to thank Eric for his thorough presentation of the area, and could we actually go back one more slide? I worked on the traffic impact analysis for this project, and currently Buffalo Road is operating poorly and over capacity, as Eric mentioned, and as shown in this table. Under existing conditions, Buffalo Road operates at a level of service F with over 230 seconds of delay during the morning peak hour and over 100 seconds of delay during the afternoon peak hour. Without this development, the traffic will continue to grow along Buffalo Road and will continue to get worse. This development is expected to widen the frontage along Buffalo Road by adding 2 through lanes and double the existing capacity. However, the development is not doubling the traffic. It is only expected to increase the traffic along the frontage by approximately 10% in the morning and approximately 13% in the afternoon. With these improvements, the proposed development is expected to bring the intersection of Buffalo and Forestville to acceptable levels of service and decrease delay by 163 seconds in the morning and 45 seconds in the afternoon. Next slide, please. Shown here is the current 2-lane section of Buffalo Road along the site frontage. Next slide, please. Shown here is a conceptual sketch showing what Buffalo Road may look like with 2 additional through lanes along the frontage of the site. Next slide, please. Staff has identified, as Eric mentioned, that the 540 bridge will need to be widened or an additional bridge will be needed in the future. However, our firm, Ramey Kemp and Associates, is working with city staff, as Eric mentioned, and NCDOT to try and find an interim solution for the bridge by potentially repurposing the lanes, again, as Eric mentioned. Next slide, please. Here is the current potential concept for repurposing the lanes into an interim solution. Without the frontage widening across the proposed development, this restriping would create a bottleneck, which is why the frontage widening of the proposed development is so important to bring existing conditions back to acceptable levels of service, as it would allow an interim solution at the bridge by providing the lanes to tie into it. Next slide, please. And then last time we presented to you, there were concerns with the reasoning behind reconfiguring the William and Mary intersection. This slide shows how close this existing intersection is to the busy intersection of Forestville and Buffalo. That signal that I showed you earlier that is currently operating with 230 seconds of delay in the morning. This does not meet current spacing requirements and is a safety concern. Next slide. Here's an aerial view of the intersection lane configuration. Next slide. And here's a close-up of how the access will be provided via the proposed site. Next slide. And here are the levels of service tables for the current William and Mary. The approach operating, the William and Mary unsignalized approach is operating at an F, and with the proposed site drive, we're expected to have that operate acceptably. Next slide, please. And just to recap, the proposed development is only increasing the traffic by 10 to 13%. but it is doubling the capacity and reducing delay by 163 seconds during the morning peak hour and 45 seconds during the afternoon at the Forestville intersection. The frontage widening provided by the development is a key piece of the puzzle for an interim solution to improve the I-540 ramps. And the development is going to provide, is expected to provide safer access for the William and Mary intersection. And I'm available to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Caroline. Mr. Mills, do you have anything else to add before we move the questions? I just have a quick question, but I wanted to hold questions to the end. But Mr. Mills, do you have anything to add before I ask my quick question to move to the opposition stand?
No, sir.
Okay, thanks, Mr. Mills. I have just a quick question about the repurposing of the lanes. I know Eric spoke about the best case scenario would be 2030 before DOT will fund the additional bridge for 540 intersection at Buffalo Road. As far as the repurposing of lanes, moving it from 2 lanes to 4 lanes, as that being an interim solution, when do we have when is our projected timeline for that happening? I didn't hear a timetable for that, and I was just wondering when you guys projected that to happen, if at all.
So, Mr. Mann, that is one of the conversations that we're having with several of the developers in this area right now. Again, like I said, the challenge is tying the improvements to the development. We've had some conversations about whether or not there'd be opportunities for multiple partnerships, given that there's so many developments happening at once, and looking at some type of partnership type implementation. But ultimately, it would be tied to one of these developments based on NCDOT's permitting requirements. So that would be relatively imminent relative to one or more of these developments.
Okay, thank you. Speaker signed up. Mr. All, can you please present the first speaker in opposition to this case?
Yes, the first speaker was Gina Wright. She could not attend and asked Jess Dove to speak in her place. So Jess Dove.
Okay.
Good morning, and thank you for your time, commissioners. So the transportation staff already went over most of the things that I was going to go through with this map. The developments, clearly, we are booming. Yay, Raleigh. But we are concerned every time we add a new development, we are adding traffic. And every time these developments are being proposed, they're being considered singly. They're not being considered in relation to all the things that are being asked of them. Also on this map, I would like to note, I am a resident of the Landover subdivision. And when things were discussed last 2 weeks ago, there was a little bit of trouble understanding exactly what was going to happen. So Landover Lane from Forestville Road to Landover Ridge Drive, which will be the new road for the new development proposed. That stretch of land is actually NCDOT maintained. So that's a concern that we have because we are going to be adding traffic through that area as well as having people cut through into the Landover Ridge area. So that I wanted to make sure that we could see on the map that it is going to be that stretch of road into our area. So the proposed development would be the third on the short stretch of Buffalo Road. These developments are in addition to the established neighborhoods that utilize Buffalo, Forestville, and the 540 overpass. We do have concerns with the traffic survey done in the fall of 2020. This is not an accurate representation of the already congested roads. We all understand 2020 was an exceptional year, and most children were not attending school in person, nor were adults going to their offices or places of business. So there's clearly fewer parents, commuters, and school vehicles on the roads, buses, and private transportation. The traffic's still not back to pre-pandemic traffic, and we don't know what pre-pandemic traffic might look like either. Office workers are still utilizing work from home. 30% of the Wake County Public School System students were still virtual as of the end of the traditional school year this month. Anyone who's traveled through this area prior to 2020 can tell you about the long lines at the intersections. They'd be backed up well beyond Landover Lane and the 540 interchange. Simply adding more lanes to the main roads, in our opinion, is not going to solve the traffic issue because of all the new developments. We're going to continue to bottleneck. It's just going to continue to add and exacerbate the problem. As we have mentioned in the previous meetings, the Landover Lane is already too narrow, so it is state maintained. We have a blind hill as well. It's maintained from the intersection on Forestville to Landover Ridge, as I said, and it's a low and soft shoulder. So if a car does end up in the shoulder, the overcorrection could result in injury or damage. Many neighbors on this stretch have lost mailboxes and side mirrors. We have children who bike and skateboard on the hill and adults who like to walk or run. And when a service vehicle stops on the hill, it is unsafe to try to maneuver around. We have signs posted. Yes.
Ma'am, I'm sorry to cut you off, but you've
Okay.
used 3 minutes already. Can you please,
okay.
can you stop? Yeah, please just wrap up your comments because I want to give everyone else time to speak, and we're at 2 minutes left. So
Absolutely.
if you can just wrap your comments so I can get to the rest of the speakers. Thank you.
Absolutely. So basically what my concern is, and all of our concerns, people are going to cut through Landover Lane, through Landover Ridge to bypass these lights at Buffalo and Forestville. We're going to increase traffic on an NCDOT maintained road that we have petitioned to be widened several times prior to this. And we do not want that to happen. So we would like that to be in consideration when considering this development.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Ray, can you please present our next speaker?
The next speaker would be Helena Halba.
Okay.
Okay. Good
Ms.
morning.
Halba. Good morning.
Good morning. Mr. Mann, commissioners, other guests, thanks for letting me speak. I have lived on William and Mary Drive for almost 43 years, and I have several major concerns about this proposal. Some of them have already been talked about, so I will try to go as quickly as I can, focusing on the ones that haven't. First of all, there's the environment. The area proposed is heavily wooded. The sole conservation mentioned is a cosmetic woodland strip parallel to 540 and buffers along Buffalo. These woods and fields are the habitat for numerous deer, foxes, raccoons, birds, and other animals. Once the area is teeming with human buildings and activity and traffic, where are these animals supposed to go to feed, mate, give birth, and raise their young? Nothing has been said about any of this. Habitat is being lost daily to development across Wake County. When habitat is lost, untamed animals become the enemy. Already there are local reports of owls and hawks attacking pet dogs and cats. The trees are a source of oxygen, they purify the air, they provide cooling, and there needs to be a plan in place for wildlife and woodland preservation prior to development. The other big deal to me is the mixed use designation. No matter how many conditions.
Ms. Halba, I'm sorry to cut you off, but can we please stop the clock? I want to let you wrap your comments up, but we've got approximately a minute left. And I just want to give that third speaker time to have their comments heard. So if you can please wrap up so we can move to the next speaker, please.
Okay, the other concerns are traffic and the mixed use designation that is going to acidify us. It is not the ultimate goal in the guidelines, shows that mixed use development is supposed to contain a lot of retail and restaurants and whatnot. And this is not in the existing character of the area. So I would like to see this area amended to residential only.
Thank you, ma'am. Ray, can you please present our final speaker in opposition to this case?
Yes, the final speaker is Matt Carter.
Mr. Carter, I'm sorry. We've got 22 seconds for you to speak. I want to grant you a minute and a half so that way you can. I'm sorry about I didn't keep track of the time well, but I'll give you a minute and a half so you can wrap up your comments.
Thank you, Chairman Mann and Commissioners. As you know, the residents of William and Mary Drive will be losing our only method of ingress and egress for our neighborhood in this rezoning, and will instead be rerouted through this new development. I and my neighbors are still very concerned as to exactly what this new through road will be like, as well as how the termination of William and Mary Drive will be done. Specifically, will it be properly cul-de-sac and landscaped to the standards of a state secondary road? It's important to note that William and Mary Drive is a North Carolina state maintained secondary road built to the state standards, as is Buffalo Road and Landover Lane. For safety and security, it's important that this new through road be built to all the states and city standards as a public road with properly dedicated and recorded rights of way for the use by residents and emergency vehicles. In the developer's site plan presented to us in the second neighborhood meeting, it showed our new through road going through an apartment complex. Forcing our neighborhood residents to drive through an apartment complex would be an inappropriate outcome, and we want to know more details about this new through road. Specifically, will this new through road be a state-maintained secondary road, a Raleigh City street, or just a private road through an apartment complex? And to what standards will this new road be built? Will there be appropriate rights-of-way dedicated and recorded, and will William and Mary Drive be properly cul-de-sac to Buffalo Road? We urge this commission to get definitive answers and commitments about these issues from the developer before approving the rezoning request. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for your comments. I appreciate your comments. And at this time, I would like to ask for questions or comments from the commissioners. Does anyone have any questions or comments? If you do so, please be recognized to speak. Commissioner Bennett.
Thank you, Vice Chairman. Thank you to Mr. Lamb for that really comprehensive transportation overview. That was helpful for me. I have a few questions. The first one is, given the information that you provided about the total new trips from approved and pending development, in addition to this development, combined with what you said about the bridge improvement being prioritized but not funded, I'm trying to ask this right, will our continuing to approve developments improve the chances of NCDOT funding the bridge widening? Or I guess I just want your professional opinion on, is it prudent to continue to approve developments, adding more trips to Buffalo Road in the hope that the bridge will be funded soon?
That is an excellent chicken or egg question, Ms. Bennett. The answer is there's significant congestion out there today. And again, these are all two-lane rural roads, farm to market roads. So there's already significant congestion now. Approving additional development might not move the needle very much as far as where it already ranks from a congestion abatement criteria standard. Again, because the congestion is fairly significant out there today.
Okay.
So the answer is it may improve its scoring somewhat, but there's already significant congestion now.
Okay, thanks. Vice Chairman, may I ask my other question, please?
Please.
The other question is, one of the callers mentioned that the projections were done in fall 2020. So when the applicant was talking about the substantial reduction in delay at that intersection and the improved level of service, was that relative to fall 2020?
So I'll defer to the applicant's engineer to make sure I've got this right. What we've been doing is working with developments all across the city to look at traffic analysis. In some cases, we've used historical counts. In some cases, we've done new counts and compared that information to historical and looked at applying growth factors. I believe that is the case of what we did here. So we're not just counting, we would not just take raw numbers from the field today and take that at face value, given what we know historically about traffic patterns in the area and across the city. So, but Caroline, I believe, is still on the call and can clarify exactly how the forecasting was done for this case.
Yes, thank you, Eric. That is correct. We used a pre-pandemic traffic count and we grew it using a compound growth rate of 5% to the year 2020. So it is actually higher than what it was pre-pandemic.
Okay, and my last question is, if the bridge is restriped to allow for additional lanes and it improves conditions in that general area, what does it do for the rest of Buffalo Road? Or does it do anything for the rest of Buffalo Road?
The restriping the bridge in and of itself doesn't do much without other improvements. And that's where those frontage improvements that come from both this development and the proposed development on the other side of the street really do create significant additional capacity between 540 and Forestville. So having those additional receiving lanes that would then break out into separate left, through, and right lanes at the Forestville intersection would be an improvement over what's out there today.
Okay, thank you.
And Mr. Mann, if you like, I can address the question that was raised by the resident from William and Mary. Any streets that would be constructed with the apartment development there on that side as it's being discussed, it would be a public street. It would be built to city standards, and then the termination of William and Mary into a cul-de-sac prior to Buffalo Road, where its connection currently is, would be done to a city and NCDOT standards.
Thank you for that clarification. I appreciate it. Are there any other questions amongst the commissioners? Commissioner Lampman.
I have a few questions, if that's okay, Commissioner.
That's possible.
Okay. One is, Eric, you were talking about other approved developments in the area. I wanted to know how many other improved developments did you evaluate that are projected? Are they going through zoning currently right now? Are they all east of the project?
Everything that I was bringing up today in the city of Raleigh's jurisdiction is either directly adjacent to that interchange area around the Forestville intersection. I believe I had a map that showed in some cases they are rezonings or prior rezonings. In some cases they are by right. Yeah, here's a good distribution here. So Rivertown is the big orange to the right there. And I believe all the ones in orange are already approved development. And so those are all have already been through an entitlement process or are going through subdivision planning now. The one that is yellow to the north off of Old Watkins there, that one has come in as a pre-submittal. So we have not actually received an application for that. And then everything that's in the aqua in this map, if I'm not mistaken, is all pending zoning.
Okay. So you're saying the yellow one is coming to us at some point?
I don't know if, I believe that's been a pre-submittal, but I don't know if the nature of that pre-submittal is that it was for a zoning submittal or if it was just for development under the existing zoning. Okay.
And then in terms of the partnerships that you're asking to develop in the expansion of Buffalo Road, are they all the green ones or are you able to go back to the orange ones?
I'm not sure I understand the question.
So you were talking about at one point creating a partnership among all the developers to help shoulder the cost of the expansion.
Oh, okay. Yeah, and so no, those are active discussions right now.
Okay, so there's no guarantee.
There is no guarantee. It's a multi-way conversation between several developers, the city, and NCDOT.
Okay. I had a conversation with the developer on Friday about the expansion of Buffalo Road on their frontage. Are they expected to shoulder those costs all the way? And then are you hoping to have the other ones that are more east expand Buffalo further east?
Yes, so the way that our system works is that, as I mentioned before, Buffalo Road between 540 and Old Mill Burney Road is planned to be a 6-lane road. So any development that comes in along that frontage is expected to dedicate right-of-way and construct their half of that 6-lane cross-section as part of their development requirements. Now, in those cases, that size development in and of itself doesn't require a 6-lane road. And so under our rules, they are eligible for reimbursements for portions of the cost of doing that widening. So, for example, a development that's only generating 5,000 cars per day really only needs a 2-lane road to serve that. So asking them to develop half of a 6-lane road they're entitled to reimbursement for that delta between 2 and 6 effectively. I'm oversimplifying, but that's how our reimbursement system works. And those reimbursements are funded through our facility fee program, which is our impact fees for transportation.
So, so on Friday, it kind of sounded like the developer was going to be funding the entire expansion. So then that is not correct. It would just be a portion.
The developer would fund the widening across their frontage. So this case, for example, would widen Buffalo Road from 540 to Forestville to half of a 6-lane section. They would be required to front those costs and make all of that construction, dedicate that right of way. They are eligible for reimbursement. So the developer has to apply to the city for reimbursement once those improvements have been constructed, warranted, and accepted by the city.
Okay. All right. So they're eligible, but as part of a condition, are we able to put additional costs to the developer?
Again, I'm not sure I understand the question. As part of a condition?
So, yeah. And the reason why I'm asking this question is, again, it was kind of communicated to me that there would be, that the developer would cover this. And the reason why I'm asking these questions is because I really like the idea of the developer helping the city fund these projects. And furthermore, if NCDOT is not projected to complete start the 540 project then until 2030, I think that this developer could get that expansion done much more quickly. And so that would help alleviate some of the pressures that we're already experiencing in this area. And so that's why I'm drilling down into these questions, is that these can get done a lot faster. And again, what was communicated to me was that they would be covering those costs. So I just wanted to make sure, because I think that that's a real benefit to the city.
Right. And so that's nothing to do with the condition. That's part of our development requirements for site plans and subdivisions in the city.
Okay, so we're not allowed to condition that in any way.
It's not necessary.
It is not necessary, but that's for the impact fee reimbursement. What I'm trying to do again is save the city more money.
Can I respond to this question? This is John Anagnos from Planning and Development. So typically, it sounds like what I'm hearing is a request for the applicant to potentially offer a condition providing some amount of cash towards the construction of the additional bridge at 540. Typically, the city does not like to engage in discussions of cash conditions because that has the appearance of contract zoning, which is prohibited by state law. And so as Eric was stating, the city has extensive, and NCDOT have extensive requirements related to infrastructure sufficiency and that are tied directly to level of service impacts caused by the proposed development. And so because of the very close connection between the impacts and the amount of infrastructure that's required by those standard requirements, not anything that would be required by a zoning condition, that really makes the contract zoning vulnerability pretty stark, because the applicant can pretty clearly point to exactly what their impacts are, that the city and the state have agreed are the impacts and have agreed as to what the improvements should be to respond to those impacts. So anything above and beyond that is going to have the appearance, in many cases, of contract zoning. So we typically like to avoid that type of requirement.
Okay. And then
also, another thing to note is conditions can only be offered voluntarily by the applicant. So
sure. And then would the applicant like to make any comments about that? And then furthermore, the timeline of their project and when they expect that expanded road to come online. And then that's my final question. I'm sorry. Thank you.
Thanks, Commissioner Lampman. Does the applicant want to respond to Commissioner Lampman's comments, our last few comments, before we move on to further questions? Seeing nothing.
I'm sorry.
Okay.
I'd just like to say that we are about 3 to 4 years from build out. So it would be expected about 3 to 4 years. And that is 3 to 4 years of when those homes would be constructed and those vehicles would be on the road as well.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions from Commissioners? Commissioner Raines.
Thanks, Commissioner Mann. Just a detailed question. For the extent of the road improvements on the applicant's side of Buffalo Road, does that extend to the ramps to 540, or all the way to the bridge? And I know this is a detailed question. It's just more for my information of what that extent is required for the applicant.
Logistically, it would be to the ramps.
Other questions or comments? Commissioner McIntosh.
Thank you, Vice Chair Mann. I have a few comments on a topic raised by Commissioner Raines at our last meeting. First, I recognize neighbor concerns with commercial and believe this concern is exacerbated by the existing commercial development pattern in Northeast Raleigh, which is mainly strip malls. Raleigh's current preferred method of development is walkable mixed-use centers surrounded by residential. I'm extremely concerned that because this pattern is not currently being followed in Northeast Raleigh, that our part of town is being set up to be less than other areas of town that are moving toward a greater walkability with commercial uses interspersed with residential. Second, I am very disturbed that verbal descriptions of this case by both staff and the applicant do not match the written language in the case. In the presentations at the June 8th Planning Commission meeting, both staff and the applicant stated that commercial is prohibited and that the project will solely be residential. However, Condition 6 prohibits non-residential principal uses, which I interpret as meaning that secondary commercial uses will be allowed. And on page 11 of the staff report, one of the statements of public benefit reads, "The proposal may create additional opportunities for goods and services in an area with few commercial destinations." The written conditions are the legal description of what can be built at this site. I have to assume that the verbal descriptions we've been given about the currently planned development are meant to obscure this fact. The City Council has voted to approve 2 cases along Buffalo Road this year where the Planning Commission had recommended denial. In both instances, their discussion did not include much of any reference to our deliberations here, other than the vote tally. It is very likely that City Council will approve this case, regardless of the opinions of neighbors or of members of this body. While I personally think commercial is appropriate here as a part of a neighborhood mixed-use center, as described on the future land use map, and I wish it were planned as truly mixed use, I am extremely disappointed in the false sugarcoating of this case by the applicant and staff. It is disrespectful of neighbors, this body, and the citizens of Raleigh. I cannot support this case.
Thank you, Commissioner McIntosh, for your comments. Commissioner Miller, I thought I saw your hand go up.
Thank you. I'm trying to look through the wording of the actual conditions. I'm encouraged by the fact that the road improvements are going to improve the conditions as they exist today more quickly than the DOT can get around to this. But I just wanted to clarify, are those conditions that the applicant is offering, or are these, or are those road improvements required under the site plan?
This is John Anagnos. The improvements to the roadway are not zoning conditions that are offered as part of this rezoning request, but as part of the traffic impact analysis that the applicant submitted for the rezoning, those were identified as mitigations. And so that process will be duplicated almost identically during a subdivision or site plan process where the total build out of the site is envisioned. And so while there's nothing that is expressly requiring those improvements in word for word in the zoning request, the actual zoning itself, the residential mixed use and residential 10 zoning, does indirectly through the infrastructure sufficiency requirements of the UDO, does essentially require those things or something that would provide a similar level of relief for traffic congestion. And the nature of conditions like that is that there is a fair amount of engineering and design that goes into those mitigations. It's very difficult to do the level of detail of design that is going to go into a site plan and a site permit review process. To write that into a zoning condition and have it not have to be modified later is nearly impossible. And so that's why we do like to rely on the level of service requirement, because that's basically saying we don't know exactly how the design is going to work out because additional details will emerge during that site preparation process. And I would like to respond to Commissioner Lampman's note about retail uses or commercial uses. The reference to goods or services, that is an error in the staff report. The applicant, when they initially submitted this case, it did include a neighborhood mixed use area of zoning as part of the request. They subsequently removed that and then offered the condition to prohibit principal non-residential uses. So I wrote that when under the initial construction of the case. So that is an error. The way that the case is requested today, there is a residential mixed-use district, no neighborhood mixed-use district is requested, and then there is a condition to prohibit principal non-commercial or non-residential uses. There are not many ways that a developer could establish an accessory retail use in an RX district. That concept doesn't really exist in our zoning code. Really, the only way that an accessory non-residential use could be established in this zoning request, in the way that I'm reading it, would be a live-work type situation where someone has a business operated out of their own home, like salon or baked goods, which is allowed in all residential districts. So I believe that the way that the applicant has spoken of the case and the way that it's been presented during these meetings is accurate. There was an error in the staff report.
Commissioner O'Haver, then I see you, Commissioner Bennett. We'll go with Commissioner O'Haver first.
Just a quick question for that last comment, because it seems like I remember some discussion about this at the last meeting, but can I ask the applicant why they initially came in with non-residential uses and then removed them?
Yes, thank you, Commissioner, for the favor. And I did touch on this at our previous planning commission meeting.
Hello, Mr. Mills. I'm sorry to cut you off, but you've got a bad echo on your end. We can't really hear you. I want to see if you can fix that, and we'll ask. Go ahead. You go ahead and speak now and see if that's better.
Is this any better?
No.
How about now? Is that any better?
No, you keep getting it. Seems worse and worse.
Great.
It sounds like it might be a bad Bluetooth connection if you're using something.
Yeah. Mr. Mills, do you have any other means of communication? Commissioner Lampman.
I had a question for Ken, if that's okay. Ken, how did you feel about the point that Raleigh should be a walkable city and that this is kind of not really providing that opportunity?
Well, certainly embedded in this comp plan and in our zoning tools is a desire to do exactly what Commissioner McIntosh said, which is to discourage the development of the city through single-use pods that are only accessible via automobile and provide the options for other modes of transportation to go and run errands or do other day-to-day business, and walkable mixed-use centers as a way of organizing commercial development is probably the most effective land-use planning tool in mitigating traffic impacts. We've seen again and again that where quite dense development goes in with that type of development pattern, that the impacts are much lower than they would be if those uses were physically segregated and only accessible by automobile. So, if you look at even at places dense as North Hills with the giant office towers and other things that's gone up, if you were to project that same amount of development as a series of office parks and subdivisions and strip malls, you would have gotten traffic impacts orders of magnitude higher than what we're actually seeing in the real world. Traffic is up somewhat on Six Forks, but it's not up, a huge, this kind of amount that you would expect if you looked at all those land uses in isolation. Same thing with infill apartments that have gone in around downtown and Cameron Village. Many of the counts on those streets are flat or only up marginally, despite the addition of hundreds, in some places thousands of new apartment units. So I think, speaking generally, that is a better way to grow, and it's what the city encourages. And the market for that development has gotten a lot stronger over the years, such as there's less fighting over it with the development community, but that isn't true for all parts of the city. And there are many parts of the city, particularly some of these lower density areas, where the infrastructure is not in place and kind of has to be built from scratch, the connected streets and stuff, where it's a harder sell. But in general, for an area like this, which is a designated commercial node off of a highway that's served primarily by arterial streets, it would be good to have a mixed-use node here that included walkability as part of its design pattern. And right now, there's CX zoning on the south side of Buffalo Road at this intersection. No commercial has been built there as of yet. But the primary tools that we have for encouraging walkability, which are the frontages, have typically not been applied here and in other areas like this. So I think Commissioner McIntosh is correct in that, and it would be beneficial to see more walkable development in more places. I think it's a model that scales to a variety of different densities and can be applied most anywhere if you have a big enough site that it can kind of control the environment and create that internal connectivity within it.
Thank you, Mr. Bowers. Commissioner Bennett, I'm sorry for missing you earlier.
Thank you, Vice Chairman. Given what Ken just said, my comment was going to be about mixed use, similar to what Commissioner McIntosh had said. It seems like on the one hand, we're trying to come up with solutions to alleviate traffic conditions on Buffalo, and on the other hand, we're allowing a form of development that makes it worse. So Mr. Lamb said very clearly in his presentation, and he said that to us before, that one of the best ways to reduce trips and alleviate traffic congestion is to have a mix of uses, because it reduces the number of vehicle trips. And this case does not have that mix of uses, even though it's a mixed use rezoning. And I know Worth wasn't able to speak, but I had talked to him about this, and my understanding is they came in initially with a mix of uses, and after meeting with the neighbors, they removed that in response to some opposition. So he can correct me if I'm wrong. I don't want to speak on behalf of the applicant, but that's my understanding based on my conversations with them. However, it still seems like we're talking out of both sides of our mouths, I guess. We can't alleviate the condition and then allow a type of development that makes it worse. So based on what Ken just said, it seems to me that this rezoning is inconsistent with the comprehensive plan, not consistent, because we're not, or it would not promote the type of development that the comprehensive plan says is desirable. So that was my first comment. And my second question is, in all of these traffic improvements that we're talking about, what is being done in consideration of pedestrians and cyclists? I mean, we're adding a lot more traffic. We're reconfiguring that road through the development, and there was some discussion about it maybe going through an apartment community. So what types of amenities or accommodations are being made for bicycle and pedestrian safety in this area?
Thank you, Commissioner Bennett, for your comments. Before we move to the answers to those questions, I believe Mr. Mills has his technology fixed now. So I'd like Mr. Mills to respond to your comments and also to Commissioner O'Haver's comments too. So Mr. Mills, are you ready to speak?
I am. And to touch on Commissioner O'Haver's comments first, at our original Planning Commission meeting 2 weeks ago, we stated that at the beginning of this process, we went to the neighbors with a mixed-use site plan and a mixed-use zoning. We heard resoundingly from those neighbors that they did not want any commercial uses on this property, which is consistent with what we heard from the neighbors today. And so out of respect for those neighbors, we took out any commercial uses and included a commercial use prohibition in our zoning conditions. And on the transportation side, I think it is very important not to get, lost in the forest here. The dedication of right-of-way from this development for Buffalo Road has incredible benefits to this stretch of Buffalo Road and the Forestville Road intersection. As of today, it is a failing road. We cannot fix all of the failing roads and all of the failing road sections in the city of Raleigh. But we can fix this section of which we front from 540 interchange to Forestville Road. And those benefits are profound when you look at the traffic impact analysis that Caroline presented this morning. The streets that we are building within the site would be complete streets, which include sidewalks, bike lanes, and we feel that the benefits to the William and Mary residents and not having to try to make a left or a right turn out of what is essentially an unsignalized five-way intersection is the benefits to this rezoning and the safety that they gain by getting in and out of their homes is also profound. And so I understand that this entire area has a traffic problem and we can only do our part to solve it, but our part is a big one and our part is critical to solving the overall Buffalo Road overchange until that project is funded by DOT.
Thanks, Mr. Mills. Commissioner, Commissioner
Caroline, can I pop in and answer some questions regarding the traffic associated with mixed use?
Yeah, what I wanted to speak about was, that too, but what I wanted to specifically speak about was the improvements that Commissioner Bennett had spoke about with the improvements being bike lanes or pedestrian access in this area. So I wanted to try to see if we could touch on that to answer Commissioner Bennett's questions, but go ahead.
Oh, sure. And yes, with the road widening, the development will be required to provide sidewalks per city standards. And I just wanted to point out that yes, they are correct with what we call internal capture with mixed use development. However, with a development this close to 540, no matter how walkable or integrated the mixed use development is, it is so close to 540 that it will pull more vehicles from 540. And as Eric was pointing out, that southbound left turn that is in need of dual lefts today and widening the bridge, we are trying to we're working with the project team to limit their impacts there, and that's one of the reasons why the neighbors didn't want mixed use there, retail development, and that is one of the reasons is to limit the traffic impacts at the 540 ramps.
Thank you for your comments. Do we have any other questions or comments before we move on? I'm seeing Commissioner Lampman. Please go ahead.
Sorry, I'm having trouble with the mute button. I do know that we need additional housing, and I do want it to be developed appropriately within the city's purview of what their expectation is for walkability. And I think that that's what's really important in this case. So I just wanted to make that point that we do need this, but it's not in accordance with city growth and how we can actually accommodate this area.
Thank you, Commissioner Lamb. Commissioner Bennett.
Thank you. I just have one final comment, and I've been conflicted about this one because coming in, I was like resoundingly against it because I've stated several times that I'm just not supporting any other rezonings on Buffalo Road until some improvements are made. After I talked to the applicant and heard the improvements that they were making, you know, as words that they are profound improvements. And I do understand that no single developer can fix what's wrong out here. And it feels unfair to say, I can't support this when this developer seems to be doing more than some of the others that have come before us are doing. But at the same time, I have to look at this comprehensively and just everything that I've heard today, plus what I heard at the last meeting, plus what I've read, it just feels like this is not consistent with the spirit of the comprehensive plan. And I don't want to be approving bad development. Not that this particular development is a bad development, but the form seems to be not what the city is encouraging. And I don't want to be encouraging quote unquote bad development in particular areas of Raleigh, where we seem to be so careful about making sure we have walkability and transit and mixed uses in other parts of the city. And then we take some other parts and it seems like we're not quite as thoughtful about that. Or maybe the comprehensive plan beams don't apply the same to those areas. And that makes me uncomfortable. I think we should be promoting good development in all areas of the city, regardless of the demographics or the geography or whether it's rural or, I mean, the rural development is different, certainly from urban development, but I think we still could encourage that it be quality development that supports the themes of the comprehensive plan. So I feel like this is, even though the developer seems to be doing their parts, and I appreciate that, it just doesn't feel consistent with the comprehensive plan. So I'm not going to be able to support it.
Thank you, Commissioner Bennett. Commissioner O'Haver.
Yeah, I'm ready to make a motion. I respect all the comments that have been made. You know, in talking out of both sides of our mouth, the whole last meeting was about traffic. And the applicant removed the mixed use because the neighbors were adamantly against it. And now here we are punishing the developer for, we talk consistently about listening to the neighbors, trying to meet the neighbors' requirements. And here we have a developer who's done that. And now we're bringing up a new point that was not brought up in the last meeting. This mixed use was not brought up in the last conversation. And so I fully hear the comments and I see the future land use map, but there is a benefit to the public. They are improving the traffic issues along this portion of the road. And I agree, we can't fix all of Buffalo Road, but they're doubling the lane capacity. They're improving the level of service. There are other future developments that the staff went through all along Buffalo Road that are going to be required to expand those portions of Buffalo Road, plus the striping of the bridge is improving that. This particular development, from my measurements, are improving over 2,000 linear feet. You compare that, I had some questions, but we had plenty of discussion going on, but the development to the east is only on a 4-lane road. Their traffic is 3 times the amount of this traffic, and they're required to do less improvements along Buffalo Road. I'm scratching my head on that. I mean, this development is making improvements all the way from 540 to Fairview. And so, and the last comment I have is from staff, the restriping on the bridge is imminent. So that improvement is going to be made. So With all of those comments, I move to recommend adoption of the proposed consistency statement dated June 22nd, 2021, contained in the agenda materials, and to recommend approval of zoning amendment for zoning case Z5820. I believe that the proposed zoning amendment is consistent with the comprehensive plan and other adopted plans and consistent with the future land use map, and the request should be approved. The action taken is reasonable and in the public interest because of the comments I just made about traffic, as well as some policies that are in the comprehensive plan, LU 1.2, future land use map and zoning consistency, policy LU 1.3, conditional use district consistency, policy LU 5.4, density transitions, policy LU 8.1, housing variety, and policy 8H 1.8, zoning for housing. Mr. York, how did I do on that consistency statement? Okay.
Thanks, Commissioner Haver. Commissioner Haver has offered a motion to recommend approval of Z5820. Do we have a second for that motion? Commissioner Miller has seconded that motion. Ms. Eason, can I please ask for a roll call of the members to record their individual votes? At the end of the roll call, I will announce the outcome of the vote.
Commissioner Bennett, how do you vote?
Nay.
Commissioner Elton?
Aye.
Commissioner Lampton?
Commissioner O'Haver, you made some really good points. I was concerned about Ken's comments. Aye.
Vice Chairman?
Aye.
Commissioner McIntosh?
Nay.
Commissioner Miller?
Aye.
Commissioner O'Haver?
Aye.
Commissioner Raines?
Aye.
The motion passes 6-2. Thank you. Let's move on to our next case. Commissioner Haver, before we move on, I'd like to hear from you. Okay.
Yeah, sorry. I just wanted to remind you and let the other commissioners know I've got a 10:45 hard stop. So depending on where we are in this conversation, when we come back, I might be adios at that point. So I just wanted to let everybody know.
Okay. Thank you, Commissioner Haver. Let's know that we've got one commissioner dropping off at 10:45, so we'll keep track of that. Next case is Z121. This case is to rezone approximately 15 acres of land from residential 6 to community mixed use 7 stories conditional use, and community mixed use 12 stories conditional use. This request was previously discussed at our June 8th meeting. The commission asked for the applicant to provide additional information that related to the small area plan guidance contained in the comp plan. I would like to ask for a brief re-presentation from Mr. Don Belk on this case.
Thank you, Chairman, members of the Planning Commission. This is a rezoning Z121. Next slide, please. As you can see, this proposal is located in an area dominated by commercial uses and institutional uses. There's some medium density residential. This is in the Crabtree Valley area. Next slide. The site is presently an apartment complex. These apartments were constructed in 1980. Next slide. Several conditions. These have not changed. It's June 8th. Next slide. Notable here, I'll just point out among the conditions of this case is a trip generation budget that would be recorded as a restricted covenant that would run with the land, impacting any future development proposals. Next slide. This exhibit shows the sections of proposed C12 and proposed CX7. note that the proposed CX7 would provide, there's a 200-foot area of CX7 that would be next to the existing R6 development. Next slide. The proposal scored highly in our transportation and energy analysis. As you see, higher scores in all factors. Next. As evidenced by the availability of bus service at the site. Next slide. The request is consistent with the future land use map designation of regional mixed use. And the proposed conditions for a hybrid frontage render it consistent with the urban thoroughfare map, the urban form designation as a city growth center. It is consistent overall with the comprehensive plan. Thirteen of the 17 policies listed are consistent. I have underlined the conditions that have changed that, I'm sorry, the policies that have been moved to the consistent column based on the applicant's supplemental statement that is included in your report. And this does include one of the Crabtree area policies. Still, 3 inconsistent policies noted. Again, these were based on omission of any reference to these policies in the next slide. The deadline for action is August 23rd. I would note that the applicant did submit a second set of responses in the supplemental statement responding to the staff's comments in that supplemental statement that you have in your report. However, the applicant's submittal was not received in time to be reviewed and included in today's report. Thank you. That concludes my presentation. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Belk. We've already received the applicant presentation and heard from members from the public at our previous meeting. If we would like to hear additional information, we would need to vote to allow additional time to speak. I can't see everybody. Would we like to hear more information from the applicant, or do we want to just move for questions and comments from our commission? Commissioner Haber.
I personally would like to hear from the applicant. I know there was a lot of discussion in our last meeting about the applicant's desire, I guess, to provide additional assistance or at least come back with some thoughts on the current residents. So I'm curious if they've done that. It looks like they've changed their application to be consistent on some of those not consistent policies, which we also asked them to do. So I would like to hear if they come back with something.
Thanks, Commissioner Haber. We don't have anybody in opposition to speak, so what we'll do is to keep consistent with the meeting, we'll allow 6 minutes to the applicant to allow any additional information that they have to offer. So without further objection, I'd like to grant the applicant 6 minutes to speak. Any objection to that? Seeing none. Next, I'd like to hear from Mr. Toby Coleman, representing the applicant. The applicant has a total of 6 minutes to speak.
Thank you, Vice Chairman. Can you hear me?
No, you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, that's better.
Okay. Do you have any trouble? Are you having any trouble hearing me?
No, we can hear you fine.
Okay. Toby Coleman for the applicant, 150 Fayetteville Street. Thank you, Commissioner Mann and commissioners. I will keep my presentation relatively brief. I do not have a PowerPoint deck because I think the 2 items really that were left on the table related to, as